What's up guys, Lockie here, and in this video I'm going to be teaching you the secret skill I've never heard anyone talk about that is going to make you emotionally bulletproof. If you want to use it to make more money in your business, you can do that. I was fortunate enough to grow my business to $1 million a month by the age of 26, or if you want to use the skill to simply become more calm, control your emotion, and be able to deal with more stressful situations in life without allowing it to impact you and stress you out, this is going to be really helpful. So let's jump into my screen and dive into the first slide. So your life is just the sum of your decisions, and emotion silently corrupts them. Okay, nobody loses fortunes, marriages, or friendships in calm moments. They lose them in 30 seconds of emotion, then spend years paying for it. So this isn't about being nice, it's about decision quality under pressure. And I have made this mistake so many times. I know you probably have as well. So this is gonna be really, really valuable. This video is not gonna get heaps of views. It's literally just for 1 or 2 people who wanna change their entire life, and for my brothers and for my family. Okay, so speaking of my family, like my dad wasn't rich at all, but he was emotionally brilliant. He spent his entire life basically thinking about human psychology, and it really helped me. So when I was about 17, I was pretty angry at the world from all the bullying that had gone on in my life, and I was a pretty angry young kid who dealt out a lot of pain because I had a lot of pain. And what my dad was able to hand me is what I refer to as X-ray glasses, and I'm about to give them to you, so pay very close attention, okay? So he taught me emotional awareness and emotional intelligence when I was 17 years old. I couldn't really care less. I listened, but then I actually practiced and implemented, and my life started to dramatically change in ways that even people still to this day, I'm now 28, have no idea even exist. And it paid dividends for the rest of my life. And this is going to be really good wisdom if you're dealing with hard things in your life, and particularly if you're dealing with hard people in your life. Okay, and what I'm actually about to discuss here, it actually has a name, and it's called the gap. And this is a beautiful quote from Victor, who actually survived the Holocaust. He wrote a book and everything, which is, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And that's really the key word there, is freedom. In your response to emotional things is your freedom. And no one talks about this because it's super lame, it's super boring. But I definitely would not be where I am today, both from a business success perspective, but most importantly from a being able to handle stress perspective, which is incredibly important regardless if you're an entrepreneur. Okay, so let's dive into some specifics here. So this is kind of when it arises the most, the situation I'm talking about. And you know this moment, it's the backhanded compliment. And often this will come from friends and family members. This will also come from complete strangers and frenemies, I guess, people that you don't like. But often it's usually the sneakier ones that can really hurt you and influence you in life. So for example, let's say you're at school, I'm using this example because I can relate to this, and you get your test back, and your friend looks at your score and he says, "Good job on the test, bro. Not an A+ there, right? You missed 3. Okay, so you did well, and the pat on the back comes with a little put down inside it. And your instinct, this is key, is you want to fire one back. And you want to say some shit like, "Well, at least I didn't get your score, dude. At least I studied," or something like that. Now, the thing here, and this is really important, is they usually don't even know they're doing it, and you don't know why you're firing back. It's just an instant exchange, and it's incredibly normal. But you don't want to be normal, because most normal people are in debt and stressed and don't really like their life. So you really want to elevate your mental thinking, and we really want to elevate our emotional intelligence here. And bear with me if this is a bit more of a rambly one. It's quite a complicated topic to discuss. So I had a friend back in high school, really, really good friend. However, he had a lot of insecurities, and he took out a lot of insecurities on me. Let's just say one of the insecurities, not to be specific to him, I was taller than him. Okay, as a guy, that can be a thing. So I would do things or whatever and have small accomplishments here or there, or try things, and he would always put me down in kind of like a joking way. You know when your buddy gives you shit? But I could tell he wasn't joking. He meant it as a joke. He was saying it as a joke, but it was consistent, and I knew it came from a place of insecurity. And when I was younger, before I had the X-ray glasses that I'm giving to you now of emotional intelligence and awareness, I would say some shit back to him and put him down as well. And it's very normalized, especially amongst guys. I'm not a girl, so I don't know what it's like amongst girls, but I imagine girls make bitchy comments to each other as well, and it can be quite normalized. However, it can really influence your actions, your mindset, and how you respond. So The jab back feels great, okay? But that is the trap. So in the moment, you say some shit back, whether it's your teacher, whether it's your mom, whether it's to an employee, which is a really bad one, I'll get to that shortly. And it feels good. It gives you dopamine. If my friend says some shit to me and he puts me down, especially if it's in front of girls or if it's in front of some other friends or whatever, I want to say some shit back to him to put him down, to one up and level up in the social circle or whatever, because it feels good. And I did for a long period of time when I was really young. But at the age of 17, I started changing the game a little bit. Obviously, I joke around with my friends and stuff, but it's different. It comes from a different place. So the problem with this is you lose long term, and this is the key, and other people hold your remote. Okay, so snapping back equals emotional gratification now, weakness forever, and long term, you've let other people's comments control your emotional state. If anyone can move you, everyone owns you. So that is the key. So with my friends specifically, I, at the age of 17, started just taking his comments and just smiling at him and saying, haha, good one, dude. But I wouldn't say anything back. And I remember I used to say to my dad, I'd come home from school and I'd be like, Dad, I don't like this emotional control thing you've taught me, because now I just feel like I lose. Now I just feel like I have to accept everyone else's bullshit, and they don't even know that I'm accepting their bullshit. I want to say something back, so they have to accept my bullshit, because then at least I can get it off my chest, and it's fair. And he pointed out to me, it may feel fair in the moment to get an equal exchange of emotional alleviation, let's call it. However, long term, you're allowing that person and people around you to influence your emotional state. And what kind of value are you putting on your own mental and emotional state when you allow any random person to make a small comment to take away your power? You have to have a lot more self-respect and have a lot more self-awareness, so that even when someone makes a small comment and they have a little dig at you and maybe a friend or two laughs at you, you just say, ha, good one, dude, that was funny, nice one. And you just take it on the chin, water off a duck's back, and you just accept it, and it feels like you lose in the moment, but long term you win, because they can't control you, they can't influence you. And here's the thing, people who make these comments, people who say these things, they are so fucking stressed in their life and so anxious and so miserable, because every little thing that gets to them influences them. So they're like an emotional roller coaster like this when they win in the short term, but you're like this. You're like a smooth, calm boat on a sea, where in the short term it feels like pain and like you're taking the L, but long term you are significantly further ahead and you're playing games that they don't even understand. It's not about beating them or winning or anything, it's just about having the best life, which relates to the X-ray. So this is the X-ray, okay? Once you see this, you cannot unsee this. Every sentence and every communication pattern has 3 layers. And it was really my dad who put me onto this, but then I had to practice it and develop my own version of it here. And most people only ever hear one. So when you're communicating, and I highly encourage you to do this, when I started doing this, I found it extremely interesting just to observe humans. And I would be in a group of 3 or 4 people or 5 people, and I would just be quiet. I would just observe the communication. And what you realize is almost all communication happens on the first layer, which is what's said. So someone will say something, then the other person will reply to exactly what they said. Then that person will reply to exactly what they said. However, that's only 1 out of 3 layers of depth. And funnily enough, if you pay attention to people speaking, you often also see, this is really funny, they don't even listen to each other. They're just waiting for the other person to finish speaking so they can say what they want to say. And that's a great way to become a very good communicator and stand head above shoulders about other people. This is just a side tip for you, is actually listen to people and respond based on what they said, and deeply consider what they say, and pause for 2 or 3 seconds after they finish speaking. Because what happens is most people in a communication, one person's thinking, they take a single breath because they need to breathe and they need to think about what they're saying. Then the other person jumps in because they weren't really listening and considering the other person. They were just waiting for the other person to finish speaking so they can start talking. And I can't remember exactly what the perfect example of this off the head, but it usually sounds something like, oh yeah, exactly. Or like they'll say something like that. Yeah, exactly. And what I think, oh dude, that also happened to me. And they'll respond with what they want to say, but they won't inquire to go deeper with the person. Anyway, that's a side tip. We'll get back onto number 2. So number 2 is what it means. So if someone says something like, nice jacket, dude, like people will respond to that, but you need to think about like, what does it mean? Why does it mean that he actually likes my jacket? Does it mean that he's insecure about his jacket? What does it mean? And then number 3 is, where does it come from? So is it coming from a place of love, or is it coming from a place of insecurity? I'm going to try and think of a random example off the top of my head. Let's say, for example, you're going to start a business and a friend says, I don't think that's a really good idea, dude. Oh, that sounds like a scam. Let's say you're going to tell your friend you're going to start a digital marketing agency. They're like, oh, dude, that sounds like a scam. So what you'll typically want to do is you want to respond to the comment that he thinks this business is a scam, and you want to be like, no, it's not a scam. XYZ, people love paying marketing agencies. The marketing agency is going up. I found a really cool guru who's going to teach me that. This other guy made lots of money. And you want to respond to what he said. But what he said is actually quite irrelevant, because if you then go to what does it mean, what he's saying? Well, it means that he doesn't believe that marketing agencies are legitimate business models. And he probably said it off the cuff like this and probably hasn't put a lot of thought towards it, but that's what it means. He doesn't, you don't have to respond to that. So then you want to get to, where does it come from? Okay, well, it probably comes from, funnily enough, a lot of communication comes from insecurity. It probably comes from an insecurity he has, that he either doesn't know how to do it, he's intimidated that you're trying to do, and this is a really common one when it comes to starting a business, that you're trying to do more and be more, because if you're trying to do more and be more, that's a threat to him and his identity, and so he'll try and bring you down. And so if someone says, oh, dude, this digital marketing agencies, man, that's so saturated, that's dead, that's a scam, you then go through this process, you pause and you think, what does he actually mean by it's dead? Well, he probably just doesn't think it's going to work and he's trying to kill the idea. But like, why would he try and kill the idea? Where's that coming from? What's actually coming from insecurity, because he's threatened that if I start this business, I may be more successful than him, or it's pointing out a flaw in him. Now, I'm using a very specific example related to entrepreneurship because I know a lot of young people can relate to that. But this really applies in every single context, whether you're speaking with a teacher, whether you're having a fight with your partner, whether your kids are yelling and screaming at you, or you're yelling and screaming at your kids, is probably more even applicable to this. If you're having a comment, you had a disagreement with your friend about where to go, right? If you can pause, and it takes a lot of practice, and get down to where is this, what are the words they're saying, and where is it coming from? They're usually quite different things. And what it allows you to do, it allows you to respond to where it's coming from and not what's said, which is really, really powerful. And once you see this, you can't unsee this. I remember I got really frustrated when I first discovered this, because I felt like I could understand people's communications and conversations better than I would understand what people are saying, better than they would even understand what they're saying or where it's coming from. But I couldn't speak to it because they didn't even know it. All right, negativity is almost always projected insecurity. It's never about you. Okay, so for example, with the entrepreneurship example I just gave then, pulling you down is easier than building themselves up and becoming aware of it, and they often don't even know that they do it. So for example, when I started my business, another example of this is almost nobody asked what I was doing. And I'm sure it wasn't the case for some people. I'm sure some people just didn't give a fuck. But like, I do know a lot of people, the silence was some form of like envy. Like, I took a lot of interest in my friends, what they did. I was extremely supportive. I'm like, dude, kick ass, do that, launch that thing. Like, you can crush that. And I had my own thing, but they were never like that with me. I had some friends who had their moments here and there, but like, generally speaking, people wouldn't ask about me or what I was doing or wanna boost me up. And to level 1 people, that would be like, oh, I guess maybe they're just not that interested. But if you have the level 3 level of awareness, you know it's because there's deeper feelings there, and they don't want to hear how you're doing. They don't want to hear things about you winning because it actively hurts them. And there's no judgment against them at all. But it can be really hard to deal with that. And so this is an emotional tool that I have developed and become aware of that has allowed me to handle these things. Potentially another example I can think of is with an employee. If you put all this work in to build this business or build this marketing funnel or improve this system in the business or do all this work to make their job easier and their life easier, and they point something out, they start using the new system, whatever, they put something out that's a flaw with it in a bit of a rude way, you immediately want to be like, motherfucker, like, I just spent hours making your life easier. The least you could say is thank you. Like, you can just say thanks, man. Like, you want to say that to them, but you don't allow that to happen because their small little lack of acknowledgement of your effort has just influenced your emotional state to go like this. And if you let that happen, dude, I promise you, there are going to be millions and millions and millions of situations that are going to force you to go like this, and you're just going to be a fucking train wreck, man. It's not what you want for your life. So instead, you think, okay, they're pointing out a flaw in the system. Let me go back to my other slide. What does this mean? Well, it means that they don't really care too much about the efforts and the improvements I've made. Where is it coming from? And again, you have to try and guess a little bit. And the more you interact with the same people, the better read you get on it. Where is it coming from? Well, maybe it's coming from a place of, maybe I don't acknowledge them enough. Maybe I don't call out their wins enough and acknowledge them enough for being a great employee. So despite all the effort, and this is a really common one actually with bosses, despite all the effort I put into building this business and creating the system and improving their jobs and paying them for it, they don't want to give me the satisfaction of telling me I did a fantastic job because I never give them the satisfaction of doing their job. Here's another fantastic example. You may be right, okay? And someone, an employee or a friend or a family member may be wrong, okay? And they're pointing something out that is technically wrong, and you, or maybe this is a really good one as well, you told them something, they didn't follow you, and then they fucked up, and you really want to say, I told you so. This is a really, really common one, especially for intelligent people. You're really intelligent, insecure people. You really want to say, I told you so. But you have to understand that you saying, I told you so, for them comes across as painful. But then if you understand and become aware, where is it coming from when you're saying it? It's coming from insecurity, because you're insecure about your level of intelligence. You want other people to know how smart you are. Because if you told someone to do something, they ignored you and fucked up, and then they come back to you for advice, or you're just in the vicinity, they know that, but you don't have to say it. You just have to get that emotional release. And then when you say, I told you so, then they won't even want to admit that you're right. They won't even want to say, yeah, you're right or whatever, because they're hearing what you said, and now they feel negative about you. And so they may even make a snarky comment, and you're like, yeah, you're right this time. And they may say some shit like that. And where's that coming from them? It's coming from anger and resentment. So you guys are speaking at the surface level, but it's really sub-communication and like meta-communication that's coming through in words, but usually both, like neither of you are aware enough. And I know this is quite an abstract concept. This is the first time I'm really trying to teach it. So bear with me here. And there's a lot of science behind this as well. I didn't want to bore everyone with all the literature, but when you're triggered, your logic goes offline for roughly 90 seconds. It's called the amygdala effect. I just said hijack because it sounds cooler. But essentially what happens is when your cortisol spikes, blood literally leaves your logical brain and you get measurably dumber. So neuroscientist Jill Taylor said the emotions chemical wave flushes through about 90 seconds. After that, you're really not angry, and it obviously goes up and down. This is just an average depending on the size of the event. But you're just re-triggering yourself by rerunning the story through your head. Now, this is an important nuance. Control is not suppression, okay? So I felt like I was suppressing stuff when I first started doing this when I was really young, and I got quite upset about it because I was like, this isn't fair. Like, everyone else gets to take their emotions out of me, and I just have to be the emotional punching bag. Like, this is never gonna pay off, right? It did. Trust me, it did. So suppressing it is boiling up and it leaks over and explodes later. If you react, you're letting it decide for you. What we want to do is we want to read it, feel it fully, feel the emotion still. You're a human. You're never going to become a robot. You just may be able to act like a robot sometimes when you get really good at this. But you want to feel it fully and let it inform you, not decide what you do. Okay? So boiling up isn't strength. You want to feel it fully. You want to read the data, then choose. That is the skill. So this is the power law, okay? And if you've read the book, I think it's 50 Laws of Power or something, there's stuff that's similar to this, but this is my interpretation. Whoever can be provoked can be controlled. That's basically what it is. And if you want some really good proof of this, look at the news. Do you know what the easiest way is to control the mass population? News. Do you know what all the news is about? Negative shit. It's all about negative shit because humans are extremely easy to manipulate via their emotions. I can't remember the exact study, but Meta, Facebook, when it was exploding in like one of the highest time on site websites in the entire planet, there was a study done in terms of what is the sentiment, which is basically the type of emotion that Facebook publishes the most about. Can you guess what it was? It was anger. And can you guess what it was mostly about? Politics, war, and religion. And because of the anger dominating essentially topics there, right? When people putting out content, people are extremely easily provoked and manipulated based on this. So you don't want to be this person over here who other people can trigger and influence your emotional state. It's an incredibly low value characteristic. You want to be this person over here, no buttons to press, unsteerable. You want to aim for this, okay? You're going to be perfect. This is an interesting example, actually. So one of my old bosses, he was an incredibly intelligent man, like incredibly smart, exceptionally good at marketing, dramatically changed my life and improved my life in many, many ways, specifically around the skill of digital marketing. However, as much as I have love for the man, he was extremely emotional. I think he had a very low level of emotional intelligence because despite being 35 or however old he was in his mid-30s or something, late 30s, he was extremely emotional. And so if any employee left the company, he would send them a cease and desist letter. And he basically had the mentality of, if you're not with me, you're against me. And I think that came from things that happened in his childhood, which I'm not going to go on. I'm not going to go over here, but I think there were wounds and trauma from his childhood that developed this mindset of, if you're not with me, you're against me. And I left the company when I was 19. I was a 19-year-old kid and he was a mid-30-year-old adult. And I was a 19-year-old kid, and he had a lot of resentment and anger for me years later. I went and started my business. It was very similar to his, and he had resentment for me around that. But it's not to get too much into that story. It's more just to say that you can be rich, you can be successful, and you can still be, in my opinion, have the emotional intelligence of a young adult in a grown adult's body. And I think it's extremely common if you look at how emotional people are, how they respond to so many things in such a dramatic, emotional way. They really don't have any level of awareness. And when I was younger, I would see that. I'd think, it must be nice because then you can just take your anger out on anyone and tell anyone to go fuck themselves and walk around, and you didn't have to deal with hearing all of it, understanding what people are saying beneath the layers that they don't even understand what they're trying to say to you, and just accepting it like a punching bag. But what I realized was they lost all their power. They gave their power to external circumstances, and they're almost like a puppet getting played by their emotions just through situations they run into every day in life. However, myself, it may feel like I have to take on that initial L because I hear it and I have to let it wash off me and be like, it's all right, Lucky. Don't punch him in the face. It's all right. Don't tell him to go fuck himself. It's okay. Long term, my emotions were incredibly stable, especially for how young I was. And that allowed me to respond calm in many situations and get a lot more deep sleep than a lot of other people did. So whoever controls their emotions controls the outcome. This is a little bit more of like a law of power kind of rule in a scenario, especially with employees, with clients, with friends and family, sure, but this is a little bit more of a business context or a sales context. So the reactor, that's the person who's yelling, snapping, and they spiral, and they're controlled by the moment. The calm one is the person who thinks while you feel and controls the moment. So every time I've wanted to roast an employee who cost me money, I paid the calm tax instead. The calm person tends to your emotions while steering the outcome they want. The emotional person in the room has the least power because they're responding in a way that is granting them the most immediate personal gratification in the form of dopamine through emotional release. However, the calm, smart person is the one who has the ability to put their emotions to the side, feel them still, but then act on the outcome that they want the best. I'm about to get into some tactical strategies here, but yeah, I've never yelled at an employee or said anything rude to an employee my entire career. I've roasted employees with like sales call reviews and stuff to help them get better, but like I've never ever said a malicious thing to an employee. And trust me, there have been times where employees have fucked me over. Clients have fucked me over, but never once in my entire life have I done that. And I don't regret that. I think that that is for sure the best move long term. The people who I admire the most and look up to also are typically extremely calm and emotionally secure people. A story I'll tell on this, actually, I'm going to butcher the small details on this, but I believe it's in the book How to Win Friends and Influence People, which I think I have just over here somewhere. Abraham Lincoln wrote a journal entry to one of his like war commanders or something who lost a battle, or he bitched out in a battle or something and he did a really bad job, and he wrote a letter to him basically just grilling him, being like, you've let the country down because of your cowardice, you've fucked over these families, blah blah blah. He unleashed on him. And how they knew this was because they found the letter unmailed years later in his office after he died. How interesting is that? So it's a lesson in the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, that you may feel all these emotions, you may write them down on a piece of page, but not sending them is the power, because destroying his commander-in-chief or whatever is not going to help anyone. It's not going to help the country. Instead, he has to nurture him and help him do better next time and address the root cause, not take out his aggression on him, which is one of the things that made him such a good leader. So let's get into the actual systems. Like, what is the actual step-by-step system to be able to develop this? I'm going to be honest, it's really hard to develop this. It took me years and I still practice it every single day. But this is my best version of giving you some strategic, actionable tips to dramatically improve the level of your emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is by far the number one quality that I look for if I'm looking for a partner, if I'm looking for a business partner, an employee. Like, it jumps out of me. It's a breath of fresh air. So steps number 1 and 2. Okay, step number 1 is the awareness, okay? So see it, then don't respond. We need to outlast the chemical. So awareness is run the comment through the 3 layers and catch the hijacked mid-flight. So the first thing is awareness. You can't deal with something if you're not even aware that you've been triggered. If a friend, a family member, whoever says some triggering shit to you, says some like bitchy comment or whatever, something negative, you need to identify the trigger, okay? Then step 2 is don't respond. You're not pausing to be polite, you're waiting out the chemical. So essentially pausing and just not immediately responding. It sounds like I'm almost like teaching a baby how to tie their shoelace, but it's really hard to do, and it's really simple because it is such an emotionally triggered thing. And Tony Robbins has this passage in the book, Awaken the Giant Within, which is you have neural connections in your brain, like literal neural pathways. When you do something again and again and again, it's literally neurons firing on a different pathway in your brain. And the more times you do it, the more times it fires, and it gets thicker and thicker and thicker, like a cord. So you can imagine if you've done something thousands of times and responded in a certain way, that's going to be a really, really thick cord. It's going to be hard for you to just cut it. So this is how we do it. So 10 seconds of silence beats 10 months of damage control. So here, one of my favorite lines is, give me a moment to think about that. If someone says something rude to you, something negative to you, and you feel yourself wanting to grill them, you say, interesting, give me a moment to just process that, please. And you may feel a bit silly, but just take 10 seconds, 15 seconds to think about it. You can imagine yourself slapping the person in the face over the table in the movies, and it flips back to real life, right? And then you can choose how you want to respond. Step number 3 is rate it. So this is a bit of like a scale. This is like a problem scale. Now, the purpose of this is it's going to help your logical brain re-engage and turn off the hijack switch. So you have the emotional brain, which is where the cortisol spikes and the survival mechanism, the fight or flight, kicks in when you get triggered and you want to fight them, usually. This is where we give power to the logical side of the brain that is more analytical. So I really like this. So you want to come up with your own 1 to 10 scale of problems. And this is my scale. So a number 1 problem in life for me would be dropping my toast and it lands on the buttered side down. That's like a number 1 problem, right? A number 5 problem would be like I badly break my leg. Can't walk, it's painful, got to do a cast, probably hospital bills, etc. And number 10 is my whole family dies in like a car crash or something, right? So it's like, that's my level of problems I can have in life. So once you've analyzed that something's triggered you, you've paused for 15 seconds, you now want to rate it in your mind. And so if it's someone cutting you off in traffic and they fucking say, fuck you for being too slow or something, how big of a problem is that? Is that a 5? No, it's not a 5. Is that a 1? Maybe it's a little bit higher than a 1. Maybe it's like a 1.5. Maybe it's a 2. If your friend makes a comment, if your parents say that you're a moron for wanting to start a business or whatever, like how big of a problem is that? If your parents are going to kick you out of you if you don't go to university, yeah, that's a problem. But how big of a problem is that? Is it a 5? Would you rather break your leg than your parents threaten to kick you out? I don't know about that. So you basically come up with this and then you try and rate it as quickly as you can, and that will give you some justification, because if you rate it a 3, you're significantly less likely to emotionally respond like it's a 6, okay? And your emotional brain doesn't have a scale, it just goes up. It's like a thermometer, just goes bang, goes through the roof, and it's very hard to control it and calm it down. So this is what we do. Now, step number 4 and 5 is we ask, what would the calm version of me do? Then do it. So there's what do I feel like doing right now, which is typically some form of revenge, right? Or emotional getting off your chest. But then there's what do I actually want? What's the outcome? Not what feels good, what gets me the outcome. So you have to then take that action, and then if you possibly can, you then exit or add space so your emotional side has time to actually cool down and doesn't undo the good work that you just did. I think I have a good example here for a parent. Yeah, here we go. Great. Let me give you a bit of an example here. I've had to coach many of my employees and other people through this. So same moment, 2 different futures. So let's just say you're a young, ambitious person and you want to go start your own business and you don't want to go to university, but you have controlling parents. They think if you don't go to university, you're fucked. They're going to kick you out the house, blah, blah, blah. So you get into a shit fight with your parents and they're yelling at you to go to university, okay? And what you probably do and what you want to do is you want to react, which is fight. You want to yell back at them. You want to tell them they're stupid. They don't know what they're talking about. Resentment, and then there's months of damage, and your relationship with your parents is on thin ice when it comes to this topic. Okay? They dig in. The relationship bleeds for months, etc. Instead, what we want to do is pause. We want to recognize layer 3, which is where is it coming from, and then we say, "I know this anger is love. Thank you," and we kill the fuse. Okay? So let me be a little bit more specific with this example. If your parents are yelling at you to go to university, you just think they're trying to be controlling, they're dominating, they won't let me do what I want, and they're probably being aggressive about it. They're probably yelling at you, saying you don't know what you're talking about, you're only fucking 18 years old, blah, blah, blah. Being super condescending and stuff. And if you respond like a child, you're reinforcing everything that they're saying. So instead, you really can have an extremely high level of emotional intelligence at a young age. And instead, what you can say is, okay, I hear that they're saying that they want me to go to university. I understand it means that they don't understand anything about business because they're not online internet entrepreneurs. They're not done what I have done. So they have no idea. They have no context around it. And I know where it's coming from. It's coming from them wanting the best for me. So imagine if you handled it like this. Imagine if you said, okay, mom and dad, I first of all just want to say thank you for caring so much about me. I understand you want me to go to university. I understand that entrepreneurship is not the path that you want for me. And that's because you guys love me so much. You don't want me to put myself in the firing line of a potential failed business. And you love me and you don't want the risk. You want me to have the best possible career path, the safest path with the most guaranteed future. And I really appreciate that. So I just want to say thank you. Even though that's not necessarily how I want to live my life, I do understand where it's coming from. And I promise you, I'm going to do everything I can to fulfill that wish in a way that makes me happy just as much as it makes you happy. Done. Can you imagine? I think I have this on the next slide. No, I don't. So what happens here is when someone's being really emotional and really angry and arcing up, and you're able to go through this really good process here and you respond in a positive way, it's like a pat in trouble. It shocks them and it slaps them across the face. And if they're really dumb and emotional, they have a dumb EQ wise, emotional intelligence wise, they won't recognize in the moment. They may never recognize. The people who are a bit more smart, they'll still respond emotionally, but then later on upon reflection, they're going to feel really stupid because they're going to look back and be like, I was just yelling at this person, getting super mad, and they thanked me. What just happened? And it's going to catch them off guard, and they're going to feel really dumb and really stupid. And then the people who are more emotionally intelligent, they'll stop in the moment because they're not getting the fight back that even logically or emotionally justifies their anger still going out. For example, I'm using lots of parent examples. It's because I don't have many other examples I can use that aren't super personal with people. Let's say that your parents don't want you to go out, or they want to ground you or something, and they're yelling and screaming at you or whatever, and they're expecting you to fight back and push back, and instead you just say, hey, look guys, I understand that this is a boundary that you'd like to implement because in some way, shape or form, you feel like that's what's best for me to learn the characteristics, to become a better person, to have better morals, be more disciplined, or whatever it was the mistake that I made. However, I don't want to have a relationship between us where I resent you because you're putting these boundaries on me that long term will create a resentful relationship. So how does this sound? How about we sit down, we talk through what the problem is, then let's put in an actual, real, effective solution to whatever the problem was that made this occur. But banning me from leaving the house and turning my home into a prison is not something that's going to make me feel emotionally comfortable, emotionally safe, and encourage a good two-way communication street here long term. And so I'm not going to let that happen. So let's put something in place that's more stable. Now you may be listening to this, maybe you've got fucking Latino or Latina parents, whatever, you're like, that's never gonna work. These are just specific examples that I'm pulling off the top of my head. The important thing for you to understand is you need to be the one who's in control, despite all the chaos and the madness around you trying to influence you to basically drop down to their level. You need to have the emotional intelligence and the awareness, now that I've given you the glasses, to be able to understand and analyze communication from other people and see where is it coming from, and then respond in a way that can emotionally de-escalate the situation as much as possible, and also influence the situation to get the best outcome for yourself and for other people long term. And this is a muscle. You need to start on small stuff. So when you have a 1 or a 2 problem, someone cuts you off in traffic, instead of honking at them and telling them to F off and giving them the bird, maybe after this you're now able to just calm down and be like, fuck that guy, screw him, but I'm not going to respond. I'm just going to turn my music up. I'm going to focus on what's happening good today, because I know that guy's going to cut someone else off and then someone else off, and he's going to say F you to that person, F you to that person. He's going to show up to work super stressed, but dude, that ain't me. My emotional time, my emotional bandwidth is worth more than that. Or maybe you come home and your girlfriend or your boyfriend starts roasting you because you've got some clothes on the couch, or you left a towel on the ground or something like that, even though you just got done working all day to pay the rent or to pay some bills, or you bought her a nice gift or whatever it is, and she's firing off at you and you want to fire back off at her because you're stressed and you've had a long day. But instead you just say, you know what, babe, I completely hear you. I'm sorry, I'm going to pick up the clothes, I'm going to deal with that. That said though, can we talk about a way that we can handle this moving forward, where you don't just instantly jump into roasting me? I've had a long day, I've had a stressful day. I like to think there's many things in the relationship that I also bring to the table, that I show up and I do despite them being really difficult, that I'd also like appreciation for. So let's talk about that and let's move forward. And it's like, immediately when you respond to someone in that way, it takes the fuse out of them. Because they'd be a fucking nutcase if they kept screaming and yelling at you when you respond like that. The hard part is responding like that, because you don't want to, because it feels good to go back and forth. So that's the video. I hope it helped. I know this was a longer one that's a little bit more abstract. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me up on Instagram. Send me a voice note. I'll listen to it with some situation that's going on in your life. When I have time in between work things, I always get back to my DMs and I'll give you my 2 cents on how I think that you can improve. But this is a really special and important one for me. This changed my entire life and identity at the age of 17. It's taking me over 10 years now to develop to get to where I'm at today. So I hope it helped. If you want more source like this, click the subscribe button, hit, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.